Welcome to a world you didn't know existed, where millions travel daily to do what they love, in the places they trust. Connect with audiences in captivating ways. We are Verizon Media.
At Verizon Media, no matter what you want, you can find it.
You can pitch an idea.
People working together, being a lot more collaborative.
Whatever I'm really passionate about.
We have an opportunity to tell stories in a new way.
DIAL stands for Diverse, Inclusive, Aspirational Leaders Global. We welcome people from all cultures and walks of life who seek a deeper understanding of our world. We passionately believe in the power of unique ideas and purpose-led initiatives that help inspire, educate and motivate others to make the world a better place. We will bring you education and inspiration from the world's thought leaders and inspired thinkers. Our global community are keen to share with you their ideas, their purpose, their passion, their initiatives, their knowledge that really help transform the way that we look at the world. We will be meeting online and at DIAL Global events. We also give back to our 5 core pillars of charity: education, the youth, environmental, mental health, and the creative arts.
Organization, young people can achieve so much more when you work in partnership with each other.
Because when you see others engaged in positive things, you want to do something positive.
The people that we have on stage tonight are role models to the next generation. They're role models to ensure that people know they can work in every single area of football because they are welcome to and because they will make football better.
Amen.
This award and what this night, even if people don't win an award themselves, it gives them confidence, gives them the belief and everybody wants to be recognised at some stage.
It's a celebration of achievement in the culture and a lot of hard work that's gone behind it.
We're striving to get more black athletes into coaching. I'd like to see more in management as well. People like me lending my time, and they can only try and grow it as well. But we have to keep persevering.
20 years ago, a small group of United Nations and business leaders came up with a visionary proposal.
I propose that you, the business leaders here gathered in Davos, and we, the United Nations, initiate a global compact of shared values and principles which will give a human face to the global market.
I always say part of Kofi Annan's genius was he invited business, but he also addressed civil society and labor organizations.
The mission of the United Nations Global Compact is to mobilize companies around the world to align their operations and strategies with 10 universal principles in the areas of human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption.
For me, the UN is the beacon of principles, values, and humanism in the world.
Hello and welcome to the Dial Global Summit, a call to action championing change through diversity, inclusion and belonging. I am Layla Mackenzie-Dellis, founder and CEO of Dial Global. Dial stands for Diverse, Inclusive, Aspirational Leaders, and I am excited to say that over 100,000 of you are here from all around the world, and that's both inside the summit itself and also live streaming in across many different publications courtesy of Verizon Media, Yahoo and Brand Advance. This is so incredibly exciting as it just literally proves how many people in every continent across the globe really do care about creating equality for all. So a very warm and heartfelt welcome each and every one of you. The roller coaster of 2020 has touched all of us this year. COVID-19, the economic crisis, and Black Lives Matter have all come together to bring about significant changes to all of our lives, and also turned a spotlight on prejudice, systematic racism, and inequality in so many different areas of society. But 2020 has also seen people saying that enough is enough, with a surge of global protests demanding real change, and a rise of brave and outspoken leaders making public commitments to diversity and equality, driving real actions and measurable results. Now, we have an opportunity for transformation today, an opportunity for action, an opportunity for real, lasting and sustainable change. The question is, can more of us rise to address this transformational moment in a real, tangible way? We at Dial Global are urging all and calling for action to ensure that that answer is a resounding yes. Our fundamental principle at Dial Global is that peer-to-peer learning is the most effective method to building knowledge, changing attitudes, and developing skills around diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And that's exactly why we have designed this summit to talk openly and honestly about the obvious question. How can we genuinely drive change to create more open, more diverse, and more inclusive workplaces? What is working and what isn't? How can we continue that narrative to ensure that we learn, develop, and grow together? To this end, we have gathered some of the world's most authentic and inspirational leaders to talk openly about these very issues. We're going to be leaving behind the rhetoric, the empty talk about diversity and inclusion, and talking about what really does matter. And that's real actions, real results, to ensure that we collectively learn from each other about how to best create change in our workplaces and in our lives. It's going to be a phenomenal 2 days, and I cannot wait to begin. But first, I would like to give a very special thanks to our headline supporting partners for their support and unwavering tenacity, not only to put their money where their mouths are, but also to bravely take a stand to step up and advocate for diversity and inclusion inside and outside their organisations. Sincere thanks and gratitude to Walgreen Boots Alliance, the Co-op, Alpha Financial Software, the Premier League, the Commonwealth Games Federation, and EY. We also want to give a very special thank you to our media partners and silver partners. That's Ipsos Mori, Verizon Media, Yahoo and Yahoo Finance, Brand Advance, whose live streams across multiple diverse and inclusive publications will reach all corners of the globe, and that is thanks to you. Finally, we give thanks to our charity partners and their respective teams, the UN Global Compact, OBV, Operation Black Vote, and the Mackenzie Dellis Packer Review. Now, if you are deaf or blind or have any other disability at all preventing you from enjoying the summit, please do contact the team and we'll ensure that we do our absolute best to provide additional support. Any other thoughts as well on how to make the DAL Global Summit more inclusive, please do reach out at hello@dalglobal.org. Whether you're watching live now or on demand, we are truly, truly grateful, as genuinely without you, this would not be possible. Hello and welcome to the DAL Global Virtual Summit. This is our very, very first panel of our 2 days, and it's entitled A Call to Action for All and Why Diversity, Inclusion and Belonging is Everyone's Business. My name is Layla Mackenzie Dellis, founder and CEO of DAL Global, and we are joined today by 3 inspirational leaders who I'm delighted to welcome to the DAL Global Virtual stage. They are Andrew Denton, Chief Executive Officer of Alpha Financial Software, David Grevenberg, CBE, Chief Executive Officer for the Commonwealth Games Federation, and Richard Arnold, Group Managing Director at Manchester United Football Club and Chairman of the Manchester United Foundation on behalf of the Premier League. We're going to be hearing from our summit partners on the importance of speaking up, and it's critical that we use whatever platform we have to speak for justice, as this is one of the most powerful ways to change the status quo. Championing support of diversity and inclusion and speaking up against racism, prejudice and discrimination, in addition to embracing the discomfort when it may not be easy to do so, is so important. If all of us use our voices to call for action, from our politicians, our CEOs, our healthcare professionals, our sports heroes, and our neighbours, friends and families, we could change society together for a better world of business and beyond. Now, some of you may be thinking, to start with, that it's ironic that our first panel is made up of 3 lovely white males. Not so. I personally hate that expression, white male, pale and stale. And so I ask you all very kindly that we put away our bias and remember there are so many different types of invisible difference and diversity in our world. That's not to mention just sexual, religious, socioeconomic, or neurodiversity. Actually, every single one of us is unique and brings such valuable differences to the discussion of diversity. And when it comes to speaking up, we all know that white allyship is a critical piece in creating that true lasting change. So let's welcome our panel and take a minute to learn a little bit more about each of you and why you're so passionate about diversity, inclusion, and belonging. David, I'm going to come to you first, if that's okay.
That's fine. Thank you, Layla. And it's great to see Andrew and Richard again as well. I think it starts with remembering where you come from. And each of us have a place of origin, and mine happens to be New Orleans, which is quite a diverse community. And I've traveled, the journey I've taken since then has expanded my horizons. And I realized that the world, despite all this diversity, also is quite a small place when it comes down to what people are really looking for in terms of peace, love, happiness, and security. What I have really become quite aware over the past several years in terms of my career and position is the sense of both opportunity, but more importantly, responsibility you have as you start to take positions of authority. And actually, how leading from the front when times are hard and leading from the back when times are good becomes increasingly important. And how you embrace the diversity you represent and you aim to serve has to be sincere, has to be relevant, has to be resonant, and at the end of the day, has to be impactful. And so, and those aren't big esoteric words, they actually also have to be measurable. And now in today's social media world and I'd say digitized world, things are measured much quicker, and they're with us for a lifetime in terms of our ratings around these things, but also the impact that we have. And so from that standpoint, I think we're much more aware, much more connected, and have much more opportunity to shift the dial and become a more connected and I would say universally represented world. And our business lives as well as our personal lives, actually start to mesh. And I think with the pandemic, that has become even closer as many of us not only are working from home, but are living at work now. So I think embracing the notion of diversity and different environments and all of its forms is quite important. So it's a life lesson and life journey. And as I like to say, every day is a school day.
Thank you so much, David. And Richard.
Hi. I think that diversity and inclusion is really important for me for three reasons. Firstly, representing the club, it's been a hugely important part of the club's beliefs long before I ever joined the club, and respecting that tradition is important. Secondly, the benefit of the club, the talent that we get by being inclusive is phenomenal. And then finally, it's a personal belief of mine that that it is a responsibility for the people in power who can make a difference, that they need to affect that change.
Absolutely concur. And finally, Andy.
Thanks, Layla, and again, good to see you, Richard, and David again. You and I have spoken a few times about this, and we've often talked about the right thing is just the right thing. And I don't want to be on the side of bigotry. I don't want to be on the side of injustice or oppression. And these things are so self-evidently wrong that it feels very clear to me, and I guess to us right-minded people, that it's the right thing to do to speak up about that. But since you were kind enough to mention, and we talked the other day about the fact that I am an OWG, I'm an old white guy, that makes me part of a system, kind of like the establishment. And the problems that we're dealing with here are systemic issues. And the system's got an agenda. But I guess I wonder whose agenda the system is serving when it hurts people. It takes away opportunities. It takes away civil rights. And that's not my agenda. So the system's not serving me. It's not my company's agenda. I feel pretty strongly that I can speak for David or Richard and anybody bothering to tune into this. It's not their agenda. So David and Richard both spoke about responsibilities, and being part of that system, we have a really strong responsibility to speak up, to do things like this, as you say, put our money where our mouth is and try and change things.
Mm-hmm. Thank you all so much, and those were brilliant introductions. I am very lucky and blessed that I know you all personally, and I think it's just very commendable that you are willing to put your head above the parapet. And you know, it's not easy in this modern world. You know, as David alluded to, you know, the world of social media, everything is all over the place all the time. We are meshing together with our home lives, our work lives, everything like that. And you know, all of you taking the time to come on this panel, especially the opening panel as well, and you know, show a little of your vulnerable selves as well. I think it is just absolutely fantastic. So to get into the first question of the panel, and Richard, I'm going to come to you first, if that is okay. Is, you know, we'd love to hear some of your stories about when you spoke up for others and ultimately the impact that it had. I know that all of you stand up a lot of the time and really do what is right and ultimately are role models. And so hearing some stories about the impact and when you did stand up would be wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the first thing I want to do is give a big thank you to a guy called Phil Clement, who's a super talented CMO. But he explained to me that, you know, personal tolerance isn't enough. You need to be active. You need to speak out for your views. And that actually inspired me, given the position I had at the club, to launch a campaign called All Red, All Equal, which was a fairly aggressive umbrella campaign to describe our activities in this space. And, you know, it was with some trepidation. You know, speaking out in this area, I think there were two real fears. The first was just you know, in stepping into what can be a sensitive area, was that through clumsiness rather than intent, it would end up causing offence rather than generating a positive effect. And then secondly, becoming fearful about being the centre of attention on what is such a sensitive issue. And, you know, despite those fears, because of the beliefs and values of the club, we went ahead and launched that campaign. And, you know, in hindsight, I'm really glad we did. The support we got from our fan base was overwhelming, including self-policing. So, you know, we had a tiny minority of fans who said that this didn't represent their values, and an overwhelming number of fans who said, well, you know, that's the case. This is the club. And, you know, it does represent the values we stand for. And that was phenomenal that you saw that overwhelming support.
I think that's a brilliant example. I'm not sure, Andy, David, if you want to interject there, but I think that's an excellent example, and I think it is also it's very true of many leaders. You know, whether they be guys, you know, be women or whomever they may be. It's actually, there's that fear over almost being vilified for doing or saying the wrong thing. But at the end of the day, it's really difficult to please absolutely everyone. David, I don't know whether you want to hop in with any of your examples, of which I know you have many, and in particular you do a great job of speaking out, you know, especially when it isn't necessarily comfortable to do so.
Yeah, I think, you know, not trying to play a popularity context and not trying to politicize things for the sake of politicizing things. I think understanding values and principles, not as just big esoteric words, but as actually things we live by. And over the past several years, particularly if I use sport as a world that I'm most familiar with, sport is great about talking about individual values. When you are in the position of a federation, an owner of a club or a league, collective values become quite important. And understanding what we collectively believe in. and what we hold ourselves, our truths to. And the Commonwealth, in terms of its diverse geography, in terms of its diverse demography or demographics, in many forms of diversity as well, and then looking at its shared history. I think addressing each one of those points openly, honestly, transparently, even if there are the conversations around the good, the great, the bad, the ugly, is quite important. And this day and age, again, there is nowhere to hide. So why try to hide? It's absolutely critical to have, and you use the word, that courage to be vulnerable. Courage to be vulnerable, to grow, and to thrive. And I think the lessons that I've learned from a number of occasions where we've had to embrace either post-colonial or post-conflict realities, because we are the Commonwealth and we have that shared history, and it has had a knock-on effect, have been very uncomfortable conversations, but necessary conversations that have actually helped us jump over walls, blast through ceilings, and really create much more meaningful partnerships and work. And I do have a number of examples, but I think when you start to develop a track record of courageous conversations, brave and bold action, it becomes easier and easier to do. And I use one example from Gold Coast, where we created the first reconciliation action plan around embracing Torres Strait Islanders and Aboriginal communities across Australia, and really using the games not as a tokenistic gesture, but as a vehicle to show respect, how we respect, protect, promote, and empower these communities well into the future, and not just looking at a historical reference point, and both commemorating challenges of our past, but also embracing and celebrating the realities of our present and our future. And that's one example of being bold in terms of having a conversation that many before us were quite uncomfortable. But happy to share more if anyone's interested.
Thanks so much, David, and we'll absolutely come back to that. Andy, on the subject of speaking up when it is, often uncomfortable, how would you say the best way is to get comfortable feeling uncomfortable when speaking up? Because I know you personally take it upon yourself to champion and speak out about ill practice, and you do it very frequently, especially during the time and still of Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the operating question, isn't it, on some levels in making a difference. And I'll return briefly, I guess, to some of the things that David and Richard were saying first, which is around, we're talking about speaking up, but so much of it is about listening, having that open door policy, authenticity, and you get that track record. And you Layla, know some of my colleagues, and if people start to get used to you saying yes, then it just makes a huge difference to how the place feels, how people are. The email that I got the other day saying, do you want to stand next to Stonewall and support trans rights? Well, yeah, obvious yes. But you gain that track record and you gain that credibility, and it makes a difference. And before moving on to your question, I think inclusion is for everybody, right? And inclusion is just so important. But being self-centered for a second, I get a vast amount out of inclusion, because being able to bring my true self to work as well means that I've basically got a counselling group of 350 people too. It helps us all, right? Anyway, best way to get comfortable feeling uncomfortable, it should be a trick question, and we should see it as a trick question, because if you're doing things right, it needs to be uncomfortable. If you're speaking out in the context of systemic inequity, it should be uncomfortable. And when it starts to get comfortable, either you've got your head in the wrong place, or we've won, to make it, I guess, the battle that it is. But it's worth noting, there are a number of fears and guilt that we need to get over with. I mean, we decided as a group that we're not going to shy away from the elephant in the room, but on some levels, my career will have benefited from that system that is fundamentally broken, and we are afraid of having those awkward conversations. They're unfamiliar and unpracticed words, and making yourself unpopular. I live in a PLC world. That doesn't make me special, but I've had a brilliant experience of support from investors and stakeholders in speaking up, but I would guess, not everybody does, and you don't want to be in that place. Admitting you don't know for a leader can be pretty hard. Coming back to my counselling group of 350, I've got over that always being right thing, and I'm prepared to ask, but that level of humility is important too. I guess the big one, or a big one, is this fear of saying the wrong thing. Actually, I think a lot of people are crippled in trying to make a difference, and Richard touched on that as well. We're so afraid as to whether we should or shouldn't say BAME, for instance, and it just makes people not take action. And again, listening, be prepared to make a few mistakes. In my experience, nobody's held me against it as long as I do it with a good heart and authenticity. And again, something else that was touched upon, this worry that you're bandwagoneering, to use the more familiar in America, this, am I going to come across as just another straight white man trying to be woke? And those kind of fears, again, stop you doing the right thing. But it's the theme here, isn't it? Injustice is everybody's issue. So I suppose my parting shot would be aware of these things, but get over it, because frankly, a little bit of discomfort utterly pales next to decades, centuries of injustice. So we've just got to get over it, feel uncomfortable, and hope that the day comes where we all feel comfortable.
Some really wise words there, Andy. And I love that you say there as well, it is difficult admitting as a leader that you don't always know. None of us get it right all of the time. We can't possibly do so. And I think, as well, it's often a pretty lonely place for a leader. The higher up you go, the fewer there are people to necessarily speak with, and so it can be a lonely place, and no one is going to get it right all the time. It's just embracing those around us, and knowing that, as you all say, if the heart is in the right place and it is well-meaning, so what, we make some mistakes, but don't be so scared of doing it or championing what is right because you're worried about a slip. If you mean well, that is what matters. Richard, any further thoughts from yourself?
Yeah, I think it just goes to echo the points that David and Andrew have meant, and just to encourage anyone who's thinking about taking strides in this area to do so. I found it, far less exposed position than I felt in terms of taking those steps. Incredibly supported by staff and fans alike. Incredibly rewarding. You look around our office and you look at the talent pools we've had, and as you indicated, sometimes you can see the benefits of inclusion. Sometimes those benefits only become apparent afterwards, and having an openly out LGBT community thriving amongst our workforce and generating phenomenal work. For example, ethnic diversity, again, relatively visible, but also to continue striving. I don't think any of us are on this panel because we believe the job is done. Quite the opposite, encouraging everyone to start. And for us, for example, trying to get a representative population of people from the disabled community has been an incredible challenge, and one that we're still working on today. We haven't fixed that, and if anyone's wanting to apply for a job, you're very welcome. Making sure that we've got candidate lists that are representative rather than just just looking to see the answers at the end. And all of these things are ongoing challenges, but I would encourage everyone to either start or stick with it. And it's an amazing journey.
Absolutely. And I love that you've touched on a number of different intersectionalities there, which is brilliant. I think to a degree, certainly when I'm in boardrooms, I think the presumption is such that maybe diversity is just about gender or just about race. Actually, there's so many different wonderful idiosyncratic details within all of those intersectionalities. And frankly, none of us can have the lived experience of all of those together. And we are all on this lifelong journey. As you pointed out there, Richard, we're always learning, and we don't know it all, but we can do our best to be open-minded, open-hearted, and be able to learn more about experiences from different people's viewpoints and different lenses. Disability inclusion, of course, being a very important part of that, and we will hear later on today as well more about focusing on the ability as opposed to the disability, and so that'll be great later. Now, moving on into kind of other questions, because there's a whole number of things that I would love to ask you all. I wonder, from your experiences, what do you think is the best way of really dealing with the risk of backlash or retaliation when sharing our experiences? Because we have all touched on being vilified, and we have all touched on being, difficult, to share these things. But what would you say is the best way to deal with, what could be risk of backlash or retaliation? Because clearly, no one is going to think, necessarily the same way that we do. David.
I think the respect, listen, learn, understand, and then contribute model goes well. I think you need to respect everyone's views, whether you agree with them or not. That people have the right to speak their mind. Now, in the form of hate, you don't have to agree to those views, but people feel that they can expound them. You learn. I think there's a difference between hearing and listening, and you really only learn when you listen. We can hear noise, but I'm hearing noise to get through, so I can state my position or state my case. When we listen, we do learn, and I think being aware and cognizant of that is quite important, because then it allows you to respond appropriately. But I think when you do receive backlash, you need to take it in context, and that and also separate your role from your personal conviction on things is also important. It's always great when your role and your personal convictions match, and you're able. And I would question anyone, if you're in a position where you don't agree with the things you have to do in your role, get out. But I certainly believe that as a construct I've used in a number of organizations, which comes down to which in makes dealing with backlash much easier, because actually the whole brand of the organization and the ethos of the team and the group are actually to move as one. The importance of values. Understanding your values, having them, and those collective values I was talking about originally, how they feed into a culture. And cultures are systems. We are often, by our own social disposition, we gravitate to our familiar patriarchal cultures, that hierarchy usually led by patriarchs. I think what the world is faced with right now is this change into clan-based cultures and to market-driven cultures. And last but not least, one that we are trying to strive towards at the Commonwealth Games Federation and within Commonwealth Sport is this notion of the adhocracy culture, which is to make things much more people-centric, collaborative, focused, risk-taking, innovative, and fit for purpose in terms of its agility. What that allows us to do in dealing with backlash is to make good decisions upholding our character, and reflect outwardly with a consistent communication plan through our personality, which helps us position our brand as a strong leading brand. So values that drive a good working culture that are reflected through our character and our personality. You know, that's how we deal with backlash. Is if we're consistent with all of those pieces, it's really hard to find a chink in the armor.
Mm-hmm. It's very good advice, and I think we're all probably thinking, we've dealt with things like this in the past, and it's never easy. But staying consistent is absolutely mark for good leader, but far easier said than done. I would say from personal experience. Andy, anything to add to David's remarks? And I love the word adhocracy as well. I would say I know that every time I think of the word adhocracy, actually, David, I think of you. So I'd encourage everyone to go off and look it up.
It works great at cocktail parties, exactly.
Yeah, and you find people smiling and nodding and going, Wikipedia, quickly. Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to pick up on a couple of points, but massively to reinforce, I think, what David was saying about values. And one way or another, my two co-panelists work in larger organisations than I do, but nevertheless, we're across 5 continents. We have a lot of people doing different things on all sorts of sites and places and time zones to deal with, and it is important that there is that consistency. I won't always be there. Alpha's leadership team won't always be there, but we want these values, the values we're talking about today, never to stop. So I think it's massively important that I think it got a little bit discredited, and the idea of values and purpose, but if done properly, it's a brilliant exercise to do. It gives everybody the ability to make decisions, whether they're business, their cultural or social impact decisions, through exactly the same lens as I do. And one of my most overused phrases, it's a great thing to do. The journey is at least as important as the destination, because it allows you to talk about your values, the values that you see, the values and the company that you would aspire to be. It's a great thing to do. So massively underwrite David's advice there. And also on the backlash point, and it also speaks to fear, to pick up on Richard saying that in my mind, and again we've talked about it, Layla, one of the important admissions on this is that you are on a journey, and Richard was very, very right to pick that up. And sometimes I think people are scared of taking the first step because they're worried that people will judge them on not being at the destination. We've talked about it. Alpha does not have enough female members of staff. There we go. I've done it. And yes, of course, it's there are known obstacles for having women come through STEM, because a lot of what we do is technical and engineering based. But whilst it's not a great place for us to be, and it's a place that I would like us to be, well, I'd like us to be in a different place. It doesn't mean that I can't be on that journey, that Alpha can't be on that journey and trying to improve that situation. We're a long way from the destination, and actually a lot of software firms are a long way from the destination, and include engineering firms too. And there are some beacons and some bright lights in doing a better job than we are. But in accepting that we're on a journey, accepting that we're doing a great job with certain intersections, but also accepting you're on a journey with others is a really, really important admission to yourself. Otherwise, you're just never going to take a step.
And it's 25 years as well, so definitely some journey, Andy. Many congratulations.
Thank you. I just hope I don't have another 25 years at this desk.
Richard, any thoughts from yourself? I'm sure it's been an interesting journey for you, obviously, with Manchester United and obviously the foundation.
Yeah, I mean, I think Andy coined it quite accurately in that for me, it's been a relatively comfortable and easy decision to do. I had an organisation with strong values that included inclusion and diversity, and had done for a long period of time. I'm chair of a foundation that was wonderful long before I joined, and will be long, as Andy said, in terms of long into the future. They'll be doing amazing things, and so I think again, the learning I would say of that for anyone who's at a large organisation that does have good values is those need to be upheld, and you need to do your bit on that journey, and you need to continue to push to make sure that there isn't complacency and that there's proactivity on improving, because again there is a huge amount still to do in this field, and you can't rest having taken the first few steps.
Indeed. And any best advice from your side about dealing with backlash? Because whilst such a wonderful globally known organisation, I'm sure there are times when you're so visible that perhaps it's hard to think about how to deal with something on such a public platform.
Yeah, I mean, with 1 billion fans around the world and over 300 million of them connected digitally, you get plenty of feedback. So to a degree, that's part of the courage that comes with leadership. I think the biggest obstacle was the fear of backlash rather than the reality. In my experience, our fans have been absolutely amazing, incredibly supportive on this area, and it was a very unfounded fear of backlash in reality, and self-healing. The voices in support far outweighed any adverse feedback, and again, I would encourage anyone contemplating taking steps to be active in this area to do so, because the support will be overwhelmingly behind you, and there's little to fear.
And in terms of key lessons that you may have learned through the courageous leadership that we've been speaking about through this panel, and obviously being brave enough as a leader to put your head or collective heads of the business above the parapet, what are some of those key lessons that you have learned? Because I'm sure there's been many along the ride. Sorry, Rich, that was back at you again.
No, that was me again. Sorry.
Yeah, that was you again.
Yeah. I think that understanding the framework of how almost every organisation either has or should have a framework through which they execute these activities. And I was appointed through our leadership at board level to represent and sponsor our inclusion activities, and was honoured to achieve that. And then through our organisation, and another person to mention to thank is Rishi Jain, who's fantastic. He works with me leading the club's activities, and then you just spread across the organisation. My role then is to set up frameworks where other people can get involved. So whether that's the various inclusion networks of various types throughout the organisation, so people can identify themselves with other people in the same situation, and make sure that there's a collective voice, that the club is doing what it should be in those fields, whether it's having clearly stated beliefs and values around this area. And again, that's incredibly useful to have had a strong position on issues such as these when things like the events of this summer happen, because there's no question, if you've been speaking out on a specific issue for many years, there's no question then that you're in some way virtue signaling or jumping on a bandwagon if you've been active in an area for a long period of time. And I think that's important. And then finally, the last piece would be the constant reinvention. So, not feeling like having done that piece of work you finished, you keep coming back to it, and working out what can we take on this year, what can we make better, so that it doesn't get off the objectives list, having set up that framework and that expression of values.
Absolutely, and the grassroots level as well. I know that the Manchester United Foundation and the Premier League you've got some brilliant initiatives with the youth as well. And I'd seen I think it was a YouTube video or one of the pieces you did, and the reception that you got from some of the kids and the youth and everything like that. Kind of really getting into the community and getting out there and speaking with people. And that's what leadership I think is all about. Getting out there and kind of not just sitting in these kind of the old school kind of archetypal leadership, white ivory towers. It is getting out there, getting hands dirty into the community and speaking with people and hearing what they have to say. So on I guess the subject of positive stories and kind of key examples and achievements and such like. Andy and David, I'd love to hear some of the key lessons from your side. Things that you've learned, as well from being brave to put your heads above the parapet, and anything that particularly stands out for you that has really been a beacon of courage and light for you in your careers. Andy.
Well, I guess I've shared a few already. I think Richard talked to the notion of value cycling, which is around the authenticity piece, isn't it? I mean, it needs to be permanent. It needs to be something that's real and authentic. One thing I've learned is that it is important to speak out as part of the leadership, as somebody who's benefited from white privilege. I think it's very often easy to hear naysayers around making it clear how you feel, where you stand. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure we're all doing, and certainly we are at Alpha, tangible, meaningful things in support of inclusion and diversity. But it's also important that actually we use the platform that the system has given us, frankly, to tell people that the system is wrong. And there are just a couple too many people saying that that talk is cheap. It is, but actually right now, talk from certain quarters is meaningful talk is important. I think it's been said already as well. Listen and learn. For goodness sake, don't think that anybody has an obligation to teach you. But it's really, really important that you keep listening, keep learning, and keep trying to understand, because that absolutely informs the way that that we act and conduct ourselves. And then, I guess the final thing is around again reinforcing that we are on that journey, and it's probably a journey that isn't going to end. Do everything you can as leaders to get the right support for yourself around the journey, and it maybe chimes in with the listening thing. I kind of have an informal cabinet of advisors in all sense. I've had one for my career for a little while, but and many of them actually, Layla. But I have some go-to people when I want to listen, and they're kind enough to indulge me and the missteps I make in doing my very best to understand their journey. But in listening to people and bouncing ideas off people, I think just having a group of people that you trust that can help you inform your decisions and the way you act, for me anyway, has been really important.
That's really great advice, and I think it's great advice as well for anyone who is listening in, whatever level you may be at within an organisation or outside organisations looking for a new position, is having that circle of trusted people around you. And as you say, do we ever make it to the top of Maslow's hierarchy and self-actualization? Does that place exist? I think that we've just gotta we've got to keep going, but also enjoy the moments along the way. This is as the expression goes, it's a journey, not a destination. I think sometimes we're all guilty of worrying about how much needs to be achieved, but we don't spend enough time looking back, smelling the roses, and looking at the steps that we have taken to get there. And Dave, what about yourself? Any kind of key moments for you?
Well, I think one of the things that you've just I think both Richard and Andy have said, definitely this is a constant, regular process. So it is very much a journey, with many destinations on the way. But there'll be a destination when you get to one. There'll be another ladder to climb, another mountain to climb. And I think some of the keys I've learned is that regular or constant reflection, and honest reflection is key, if you can get there. I think a lot of the systems that we create and cultures we create in our businesses keep people down Maslow's hierarchy, keep them from actually self-reflecting of how they feel about the business, how they feel about themselves. And I think some of the best leaders, knowing when to lead from the front or follow from the back, but guide or rally the cats in the right direction is quite important. I think the thing that I have probably benefited the most in putting my head above the parapet or the tall poppy on occasion is having a good systems-based approach in which to work from. And what I've found is that there's one system that I've been consistently using over the past several years, which focuses on exercising our duty of care as a business first and foremost. So respecting and protecting people before we do anything else. And I think that includes everything around equality, diversity, inclusion, and embracing this notion of engendering a culture of respect, and protecting that culture and protecting people within that culture, creating a safe working environment. And once you've done that, then you can start to talk about how are we going to provide success for the business and for individuals, how we promote and empower people, how do we help them make the most of opportunities, to be prepared for those opportunities and to have success and thrive. And then the third block is really around this notion of reinforcing the sense of community, around appropriate recognition, and remembering. Because what that does is remembering your success and recognizing your success on a regular basis, particularly on areas of your diversity. And that comes down to good comms, but also just a good culture of how we value what we do and how we value one another. And I always like to use the notion of we give access and include those we value. Very simple. And so if we have a culture that you only will reach this if you do all these different things, well, that may be for some and not for others. So how do we create a more holistic environment that still has the accountability, still focused on delivery, but actually gets people pulling together? And I think the way to really blast through some of those tough conversations is to have good systems in place. So I would challenge everyone, with that, whatever your environment, develop a system, acculturate it, talk about it, and create the right narrative around it. And that's a first step to tackling some of these big issues of around harnessing the diversity and the opportunities that come with it.
Thank you so much, David, and thank you every single one of you. I am going to wrap up just because I'm conscious of timing, but I genuinely feel so inspired and so heartfelt actually at the courage that each one of you has shared so very candidly on your thoughts around such incredible key issues. And it's clear as well that the importance of turning words into action and how the diversity and inclusion focus has shifted beyond this feel-good rhetoric and positive optics of diversity. And we really have gone deep, and I know you all are going deeper into all of these issues and really championing and challenging the status quo. But it really just shows that all leaders, white, male, female, trans, LGBTQ+, everyone across the world, in particular allyship and white male allyship as well is absolutely key to continuing the narrative and obviously moving the dial forward. I love the stories that you shared around the measurable change, the brave action, and making sure that we stick together as well as leaders, because none of us are going to get it right all of the time. And I'm sure that everyone who's listening in as well will agree that all three of you, absolute superb leaders, spoken up, bravely used your platforms to really speak for justice and champion all these wonderful initiatives. So I want to thank you all so very, very much indeed, because it isn't easy always to stand up, and all of you should be commended for doing so. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome to a world you didn't know existed, where millions travel daily to do what they love, in the places they trust. Connect with audiences in captivating ways. We are Verizon Media.
At Verizon Media, no matter what you want, you can find it.
You can pitch an idea.
People working together, being a lot more collaborative.
Whatever I'm really passionate about.
We have an opportunity to tell stories in a new way.
DIAL stands for Diverse, Inclusive, Aspirational Leaders Global. We welcome people from all cultures and walks of life who seek a deeper understanding of our world. We passionately believe in the power of unique ideas and purpose-led initiatives that help inspire, educate and motivate others to make the world a better place. We will bring you education and inspiration from the world's thought leaders and inspired thinkers. Our global community are keen to share with you their ideas, their purpose, their passion, their initiatives, their knowledge that really help transform the way that we look at the world. We will be meeting online and at DIAL Global events. We also give back to our 5 core pillars of charity: education, the youth, environmental, mental health, and the creative arts.
Young people can achieve so much more when you work in partnership with each other.
Because when you you see others engaged in positive things, you want to do something positive.
The people that we have on stage tonight are role models to the next generation. They're role models to ensure that people know they can work in every single area of football because they are welcome to and because they will make football better. Amen.
This award and what this night, even if people don't win an award themselves, it gives them confidence, gives them the belief, and everybody wants to be recognised at some stage.
It's a celebration of achievement in the culture and a lot of hard work that's gone behind it.
We're striving to get more black athletes into coaching. I'd like to see more in management as well. People like me lending my time, and they can only try and grow it as well. But we have to keep persevering.
20 years ago, a small group of United Nations and business leaders came up with a visionary proposal.
I propose that you, the business leaders here gathered in Davos, and we, the United Nations, initiate a global compact of shared values and principles which will give a human face to the global market.
I always say part of Kofi Annan's genius was he invited business, but he also addressed civil society and labor organizations.
The mission of the United Nations Global Compact is to mobilize companies around the world to align their operations and strategies with 10 universal principles in the areas of human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption.
For me, the UN is the beacon of principles, values, and humanism in the world.
– 2020 has opened all of our eyes to the shocking inequalities that still exist around us. But there's no doubt that the Black Lives Matter movement has amplified the voices of black people across the world. We all must stand alongside them in support of making change happen. So I'm absolutely thrilled to share with you the launch of this new manifesto, a commitment to racial equality. This is a set of commitments from across our co-op, from procurement through to people, from campaigning through to customer propositions. These commitments kickstart a real shift in the way we lead and do business here at the Co-op. We believe that the act of not being racist is not enough. So I'm crystal clear that at the Co-op we are anti-racist. That means that we will work to rid ourselves of the inequalities that currently exist in our organisation. And when we see racism happening in front of us, we won't stand by. We'll speak out against it. Now, I'll be honest, we're not where I want us to be at this moment, but facing into this is a humbling but important first step. The next steps are to listen well and to take bold action. Together, we're cooperating for a fairer world.
Alpha's a financial technology company, specifically asset finance. We develop our software here in London, and then we have technical and functional staff on site at our clients helping them move onto it. For example, Mercedes-Benz in the US, if you had a car on a lease or a loan, it'd be our software helping them run their business.
The key thing that makes us stand out is our delivery track record, and we achieve that delivery track record by recruiting people who are positive, engaged, energetic, enthusiastic, people who are willing to learn.
Graduates are important to Alpha because it's genuinely a set of fresh minds bringing in fresh ideas. We're also very keen to expand from the bottom up.
I definitely agree. I think one of the key things that graduates bring to us is the energy. They come into the teams, they're fresh, it's new, it's exciting, and they bring drive and enthusiasm.
Diversity and inclusion is so important to Alpha
because we truly believe that people can achieve more when they can be themselves and when they can come to work and be their best selves.
I'm Layla Mackenzie-Dellis, founder of the Mackenzie-Dellis Packer Review and CEO of Dial Global. The Mackenzie-Dellis Packer Review, in partnership with Ipsos Mori, is a groundbreaking report on diversity and inclusion in the UK workplace. The review means such a lot to me and the team personally, and a huge amount of work from so many different people has been involved in order to bring this to light and to fruition. This is going to be the first comprehensive nationwide review that asks about D&I policies, priorities and leadership representation across multiple facets of workplace diversity and inclusion.
You know, it's great to be part of this review, the Mackenzie-Dellis Packer Review, and particularly at this historical time. And a little bit about me, I'm Simon Woolley, I'm the Director of Operation Black Vote and the number 10 Race Advisory Chair for the Race Disparity Unit. This is a very, very exciting time. I mean, it's been a traumatic time with COVID-19 and the devastating impact it's had on Black and Asian minority communities. But it's also a time in which change is afoot and people are looking at diversity and inclusion in a very meaningful way. And I'm absolutely convinced that this review, with all the people involved, including my brilliant co-chair, Ben Page, and the very brilliant Layla Mackenzie and her team, will dramatically move the dial and ensure that companies are bigger, better, more diverse, more inclusive. This is what Britain PLC needs.
Hello and welcome back to the Dial Global Virtual Summit. We are thrilled to bring you our next panel, which is entitled Black Lives Matter. Now is the time for organizations to prove it. My name is Shukran Irani and I'm the chair of BBC Embrace, the staff network for Black, Asian and minority ethnic employees at the BBC. We are joined today by three truly inspirational leaders who I'm delighted to welcome to the Dial Global Virtual stage. They are Ramses Jean-Louis, Global Head of Diversity and Inclusion, Verizon Media, Claire Kamara, HR Director at the Co-op, and Lord Simon Woolley, CBE, Chair of the Mackenzie-Dellis Packer Review, Operation Black Vote, and Advisor to Number 10 Downing Street. A very warm welcome to you all. Now, the last year has seen thousands of people around the world taking to the streets to protest against racism, showing unprecedented support for the Black Lives Matter movement. It also saw many large organizations facing fierce public backlash for stating that Black Lives Matter, whilst having shown no true commitment to fighting social injustice internally or externally, or shifting the dial, particularly at senior leadership levels. Today, we're asking if this groundswell of public opinion has finally inspired true action from organizations to address systemic racism and inequality that they have unwittingly helped to maintain. Is this a moment that will pass, or is it a movement that will last? In this panel discussion, we will be asking our leaders what they are doing to level the playing field for the thousands of Black, Asian, and minority ethnic people in the organizations, and what you as leaders can do in your own organizations to dismantle those inequalities. Now, before we get into the details and hear from our brilliant panelists, it would be great to learn a little bit more about each of you and why you are so passionate about diversity, inclusion, and belonging. Lord Simon, if I may come to you first.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure and an honor to be with my panelists and to be on this historical global dial-in. I mean, it's exciting. I feel the energy watching and listening to some of the discussions. I'm an activist. I see myself in many ways as a disciple of Dr. Martin Luther King. We all know Dr. King had a dream, but many people should also know that he had a plan. Step one of his plan was to politically empower African Americans to be in a position where they're no longer asking for justice, racial justice, but they can demand it. And as we fast forward, I think it's 67 years since his wonderful speech, the I Have a Dream speech. The anniversary was just a few weeks ago. Here we are again in another historical moment. And I think it's well of us to look back on that speech, that vision, the dream, but also to translate that dream into action. This whole dial-in agenda that we've got today is predicated upon action. So as an activist, I seek to encourage and empower African, Asians, Caribbeans, and other minority communities to have a political and civic voice, but also to hold our institutions to account when they're inclusive, when they're representative, but when they're reaching out. Everybody benefits. The individuals involved, the people that they are seeking to serve, or their customer base. It's a win-win-win. If we get it wrong, and we could go down the wrong path here, if we get it wrong, we're storing up trouble that frankly we don't need.
Thank you, Lord Simon. What an introduction. Absolutely brilliant. Ramses, may I come to you next? Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're so passionate about this agenda.
Yes, thank you, Shoku. So very happy to be here and to be here with great panelists, Lord Simon and Claire and yourself. I'm excited to be here and I'm excited to have this conversation because I am passionate about diversity and inclusion. I am the son of Haitian immigrants. I have experienced what not being included feels like and what that could lead to. Being the son of Haitian immigrants, it wasn't unusual that, in New York City in the 80s, that Haitians would be bullied, would be made fun of, would experience physical harm. One of the first diversity and inclusion campaigns that I was able to work on actually had to do with a Haitian man, Abner Louima, who was assaulted with a plunger while he was in police custody. So what Dr. King told us in terms of injustice anywhere represents injustice for everyone. And it's absolutely true. I'm thinking about yesterday, and I'm thinking about the decision that came down in the criminal case for Breonna Taylor.
Right.
Breonna Taylor and her family did not receive justice yesterday. They did not receive justice. And that means all of us did not receive justice. There was a settlement in the civil case, but we all know that her family would much rather have their daughter with them as opposed to have a financial settlement. Granted, there's no way to bring Breonna Taylor back. However, there was an opportunity to hold the people accountable who was responsible for her murder. So I am passionate for diversity and inclusion for a variety of different reasons. It also makes very important and good business sense to make sure that we have inclusiveness in our organizations.
Ramses, thank you very much. And last but not least, Claire.
Thank you. Well, fabulous. How do I follow those? So a bit about me. Claire, work for the co-op. I'm the eldest of 5 children. I grew up in Hounslow. My mother was a single mother. And I think that I am kind of testament to some of the benefit of having the right support and encouragement to be where I am today. The reality is, though, that that isn't always the case. And I think that we're going to go on a bit later to talk about some of our experiences. And so some of my experiences, and also the fact that, historically and my career to date has been around, this is my 4th movement. So working for the co-op movement, I've worked for the Olympic movement for a couple of times. And I think that one of the things that has always inspired me is the ability within the world of sport to enter a playing field, regardless of your economic background, regardless of potentially the fact that, especially in the Olympics, there are warring countries where wars stop on the playing field and they're able to meet on a line and both have an opportunity to take part at a level moment. So I think that has really kind of fueled me, if you like, to imagine what would the world be like if actually everybody were permitted the opportunity of a level playing field so that they could contribute, as you've all said, to our economy, the communities in which they live, and actually unlock their potential, which is absolutely important and something I firmly believe in. Across all of those movements has been a consistency around the power of diversity, respect for the individual, and also, I suppose, within the community, within the co-op in particular, this belief in equity, equality, and solidarity across the two. So that's kind of my passion, and actually, I'm living proof of what happens when you get the right support. Not saying that this has been easy, but still. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claire. So we're picking up the theme of a level playing field from all of you and your own personal experiences. So without any further delay, let's kick off our discussion. Now, you have all succeeded in reaching positions of power in your organizations. I'd like to ask you, how as leaders have you used your positions to drive change and challenge the status quo against racism and prejudice in your own lives and in your organizations? Now, I realize there's two questions there, so you can pick one or the other or both. Ramses, may I ask you to start?
Sure. So that's really a great question. I think the first step in terms of, really making sure that we hold ourselves accountable and really addressing the issues head on. One of the things that I really do have to share is that when you take a look at the discipline of diversity and inclusion just overall, we have failed when it comes to addressing systemic racism. And the reason why is because we've never discussed it before. We never spoke of it. At most, it was a footnote when we have a conversation around unconscious bias. Now we're actually bringing that conversation to the workplace. And we're talking about what is systemic racism? What is the impact when you take a look at 250 years of slavery, 100 years of Jim Crow, another 60 years of separate but equal, and 50 years of red line districting? What happens to an ecosystem that you create for Blacks and for African Americans? And it's easy to look at other industries and point the finger and say, yes, obviously there's gaps in the justice system. Look what's going on in the world. Yep, there's gaps in the education system as well, and in the healthcare system, because we're being disproportionately impacted. But we have to start with the man in the mirror. There's gaps in corporate America. What steps are we taking to really address that? So we built out a model based on empathy, advocacy, and action to really address and help create our action plan towards racial justice. And as we build that action plan towards racial justice, it's not about let's fix the problem for Black people. Let's drop in and see what the solution is. It's how do we partner with Black people and African Americans and co-design our path forward? That's what's very important. So we're taking all of those steps and we've built 4 pillars to help us drive towards racial justice.
That's fantastic. So I love that. Empathy, advocacy, and action.
Correct.
What a great tagline. Thank you. Lord Simon, may I come to you next?
Yes, I mean, I've heard Ramses say that before, and I've used it, and people think I'm brilliant, but it's not. It is. I think all our viewers and listeners, empathy, advocacy, action. Look, as a disciple of King, that I've recognized that you need power. You need political power, you need civic power, you need economic power. And that so we have been empowering our communities to register to vote and to vote, to make demands predicated on justice and fairness. But I also need to recognize that really as an activist, I need to take wider society along with me too. Otherwise, people believe this is a zero-sum game. If I gain, you lose. And so I have to constantly remind people that by me and people who look like me fulfilling their potential doesn't mean you lose. It means we all gain.
Exactly.
That our institutions become more creative, more dynamic. Our societies become more together, more united. We better understand each other. We live together. We love together. It's not just a beautiful message. It's a practical one, but it's one that we have to be honest about. I mean, that my two panelists know we spent a lifetime actually fighting. I would argue never before in our history have we been at a point where so many people, like your boss, Claire, Steve Morrow, is no longer needed to be convinced that we have a challenge. He and many others are saying, what do we need to do?
Yeah.
So beforehand, we were at -10 in our struggle. Now we're at 0. Now, 0 is not very far forward, but it's still significant, because the conversation now will be, when we go on this journey, 1, 2, 10, 20, 30, that the journey together is we're all going to benefit from this. We're going to unleash talent. We're going to find better ways of doing things. Now, there's a challenge with this. There's a challenge because as COVID-19 and the death of George Floyd has laid bare these institutional racial inequalities, there's also an economic downturn that can force people back into bunkers to the old ways. So the conversation today has to be, this isn't a moment, as you said, Shoku, this is a movement. This should be our new reality. You know, all your CEOs, male and female, most of them will be white, by the way, that I hope, sincerely hope, that they will embrace this journey. It's a special one, but it needs courage, it needs boldness, and I bring us back to Ramsey's 3 words: empathy, advocacy, and action.
Thank you, Lord Simon. So we're at 0, but it's not a zero-sum game. It's a win-win for everyone. Wonderful. Thank you. Claire, may I come to you?
Yeah, so I think that both of you have touched on, so on a personal level, I think that there's a lot of courage that we all need as individuals to be that lone voice in the room, to be resilient. And, you know, if I'm honest, some battles I've won, some I've obviously lost. I think that, you know, this is a time where I've really tried to really harness my power, harness my position in the organization that I'm in, to actually come to the fact where you can be saying, Lord Simon, that Steve Morales has produced and the co-op have produced commitments towards racial equality and inclusion. And I think that I'm really kind of proud of where we've got to, but we still have a way to go. And I think that one of the things that I'm really trying to do on a personal level is understand why this hasn't worked before. So why has it not actually worked before? What are the things, you know? So I think that there's a moment for D&I and belonging that needs to evolve into a new space. There's a piece around I'm studying at the minute the Truth and Reconciliation Committee. I'm not saying that that's the thing, but there were some principles within there which talk to educating, recognizing your truth, and actually making sure that you listen, and then you can move forward into some tangible action. So I'm still a way to go, but we're all trying here at the co-op and on a personal level to kind of play my part. And I remember, you know, the little girl that I was many, many moons ago. And I think that the sad thing is that some of the challenges that I experienced when I was growing up and when I started my career still exist today. And it can't be acceptable for us to still be here at this time and still be experiencing some of the challenges that we are challenging as a Black community. So that's kind of where I am trying my best to move to.
Thank you, Claire. And it's important to remember, isn't it, that whilst you are, if you like, fighting these battles and advocating, you yourself are people of color who are impacted personally. So there's a cocktail of emotions going on there. And I like what you said about truth and reconciliation. It's an important work, isn't it? Before knee-jerk reactions and jumping into action, actually to stop and think and apologize for the pain that's been caused in the past. Thank you. So I'd like to move on to ask, would really love to know what steps are being taken in your businesses to ensure Black, Asian, and minority ethnic voices are being heard and represented at all levels in your organizations, including and crucially at your leadership boards and executive teams. Claire, can I ask you to start this time?
Yeah, so thank you, Shoku. So I think that Black Lives Matters and the death of George Floyd on the 25th actually of May, that, you know, not long ago, 25th of May, really was a catalyst for all of us, and for me in particular, to really think about what this was stirring up, but also, I suppose, what the root causes were within this, because I think, you know, responding to the moment was right, but actually, how can we kind of bring this forward as a co-op and really kind of move something so that we've got something that is sustainable for the future? So brief that I got from my CEO, Steve Morales, was, what can we do? Be bold. Yeah, and historically, we'd already started in the people function around the lived experiences of our Black colleagues, Black BAME colleagues, what we needed to do, and it was already a priority. But I think that what I seized was the fact that the door was open and I was kind of going to run through it. So what we looked to and what our premise was around kind of how do we go from social injustice to social justice? How do we move from exclusion to inclusion? How do we move from powerless to empowering? And I think that all of those under the premise of, to your point, Lord Simon, earlier on, that, you know, it's not a pie. There's enough for everybody in terms of, if you bring one up, you don't lose. Yeah. So I think that what's really important was that the empowering and giving a voice within our organization was important, but also how do we pivot the whole of the organization to actually address this? So we launched last week a set of commitments that are bold, which talk to how do we operate within our community and move some of our contribution from 20% to 25%. How do we actually commercially buy? How do we look at all of those things? I'm happy to kind of share that in detail later. But fundamental to all of that was having the bold action, having the humility to understand that we've got a lot of work to do. Yeah, so bold action, humility to listen, educate ourselves, and make sure that we're really grounding it in some action that can really move forward. So we are not kidding ourselves that we're at the start, but we're absolutely determined through the whole of the exec and for the whole of the co-op for us to kind of start our movement and play our part in making a difference.
Claire, thank you. So much good practice there to share. And the point you make about humility is such a key one, isn't it? To humility, to know that you don't necessarily know or understand the lived experience of someone different to you. Ramses, may I come to you next?
Sure, absolutely. I love the fact that Claire was talking about, you know, taking bold steps. The name of our African American and Black employee resource group is called BOLD, and they've been challenging us to make sure that we take bold steps, and we've taken some bold steps. Then they've come back to us and they've asked us, now it's time to take bolder steps. And we've been doing that. So one of the things that we've done that I mentioned earlier was the fact that we put together a racial justice super committee that doesn't just consist of our leaders, but we bring in members of our ERG and members from across the business for us to really talk about what is our strategy and what is our path forward. And I have to say, incredibly proud of our ERGs and the members of our racial justice committee, because they have helped to inform our strategy to move forward. They have empowered us with the language that we need to use in order to build the foundational building blocks. You know, in terms of, well, when we're having these conversations, are we talking about social justice? No, let's talk about what we need to do for racial justice. When we're talking about George Floyd, are we talking about the tragedies that surrounded George Floyd? No, let's talk about the murder that took place. Let's actually say name. Let's talk about Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery. Let's bring back that humanity that has been taken away from them. And again, it's the avoidance of using certain language that I think has kind of created a certain degree of hindrance in the past. So we're taking all those steps with our racial justice super committee. In addition to that, we're inviting in our ERGs to participate in some of our VP meetings as well. So Bowl has had an opportunity to actually sit in on some of our VP meetings with our chief executive officer. That has helped tremendously. In addition to that, what are we doing from a talent acquisition perspective? How do we make sure that we get more Black and African Americans in senior leadership roles? So it's what organizations do we partner with that can help us really build out that pipeline? In addition to that, what are we doing with the great talent that we have that's already within our organization that happens to be diverse? How do we create internal mobility? So I have to say that I am very proud that, as I take a look at our demographics and our numbers, pulling the numbers from June and July to August, we have made, some improvement and some increase in terms of internal hiring and external hiring. But again, we're still just at the very early stages of it, and there's still a lot to go. And I love the recurring theme that keeps coming up, the idea of abundance. Just because we're being inclusive and we're creating additional opportunities for people of color, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're taking away opportunities from any other group. And I think there's a fear that comes up, and we got to constantly address that. Fear and faith cannot live in the same house. So we have to address the fact that we're going to focus on abundance, and we're going to create more opportunity for our hypos and for our people of color and for our indigenous communities and for all spectrums of diversity within our organization. But we're also going to be unapologetic about the work that we're doing specifically for Blacks and African Americans right now at this time, because this is where the spotlight is.
Yeah.
Ramses, thank you. That's fantastic. And there is a quote, isn't there, that for people who've enjoyed privilege, equality feels like oppression. So that when you're trying to move the dial, it feels like a threat to many people. So thank you for that. Lord Simon, you are advocating at the very highest levels in the country. You're advising Number 10. You chair Operation Blackfoot. How are you using your position of power to ensure that all voices are heard at every level in organizations?
Well, in the past I was an angry young man, and sometimes I'm still angry and impatient and frustrated. But I know, as I said before, that we need to take people along a journey. And there's a few phrases that come to mind. Claire mentioned one: truth and reconciliation. And I think with the Black Lives Matter historic moment, there's a generation of young Black kids and white who've gone on the street demanding that we confront our history. In the UK, they've torn down statues and want to lay bare the often horrific history of our institutions. And the thing about that is that this also benefits everybody in this truth and reconciliation process, because what you fundamentally get is knowledge of the past and how it's influenced the present, but acknowledging that. So knowledge and acknowledgement of what's occurred and what is built on 200 years of slavery, 200 years of colonialism, 200 years of extreme racism, the institutions that benefited from it, many of them in our banks, our shipping magnates, our insurance companies, were predicated on that gross inequality. Confront that, lay it bare, and rebuild better. One of the things that I did with the former Prime Minister, Theresa May, in this conversation was to say, look, our institutions need to have what we described a racial disparity audit, to look at who runs things, who is in management, who are the cleaners, who are the security guards, lay it bare. She said boldly that we need to be brave. We need to lay bare those uncomfortable truths. And when we do that, then we came up with a mantra: explain these disparities, which actually are inequalities. Explain or change. And then we began that process on how we change. I'm no longer the chair. I'm the former chair of the Racial Disparity Unit, but I'm shouting to the present government. So I think for many companies and institutions, the two things: truth and reconciliation, and racial disparity audits, ethnic minority pay reviews, see who's being paid what, and then have a plan to close those gaps.
Thank you, Lord Simon. Again, we've come up about truth and reconciliation and the importance of acknowledging rather than just saying, let's move on, actually acknowledging what's happened in the past. So the question on everyone's minds is, what next? Now, we've all been here before. What do we think needs to happen next around the globe to ensure that all of our organizations, both public and private, truly reflect and represent the incredibly diverse world we live in? Lord Simon, may I come to you?
I think the first thing, to be crystal clear, that our politicians, our companies, our leaders, our society must not get into what some describe as a culture war. This culture war, they're saying they want to erase our history, that they want to crush everything that we care about. And they want, some of our detractors want to divide and rule just because we want to lay bare the real history and the way that history has predicated on locking people out, particularly gender, race, and many others, locking many out and locking a small minority in, perpetuating that. And so that we have to have these conversations about our history and say, no, this is not a culture war. This is a culture enhancement. This is an historical journey that we need to understand. That we need to find allies, black and white. I mean, often it shouldn't be this way, but the reality, as my fellow panelists will tell you, that sometimes a white CEO like Steve Morrows, I hope I got his name correct, when he says, as a white man, I need to understand the racial, deep-seated racial inequalities. Sometimes, Shoku, it's more powerful him saying that than me. It's definitely showing empathy. It's definitely wanting to see a world through my lens. And so we need allies. You know, as men, we've got to stand up for women. We've got to stand up for other oppressed peoples. It's not just we're saying this is a black issue. We're saying this is an issue of greater equality, and we need to recognize that. I'm often worried about the D&I, the diversity inclusion agenda, as Ramses says, that often it is ignored race. And so when I see D&I, I think it'd be about white women. No disrespect about the gender, but if it's just that, then I have a problem with it. So it needs to be truly, truly inclusive. We need to have that. We need to have that antennae that brings everybody on board in this conversation. And I think lastly, I would say again and again and again that our globe will enter an economic downturn. And as we do that, it's easy for us to default into what we've known when we're recruiting, when we're letting people go. And if we default to the old way, not only will nothing change, but even the gains that we've made could go backwards.
Empathy again and allyship coming up there. Claire, if I could come to you.
So I think that cooperation, I'm going to say that, aren't I? But cooperation is really important. And I think that what's for us is courageous action and progress, but not worrying about having perfection. I think that when it comes to diversity, inclusion, belonging in whatever form, we should have no competition. Yeah, as organizations who actually own and lead thousands, if not millions, I don't know how many, are here now. There's no competition. Share, come together in terms of the spirit of cooperation so that we can all move the agenda together. So I think that's really important. And obviously grounded in that, there's tangible results around making a real difference in terms of people's lives, be it through social mobility, be all those things. But I really believe that it's really important that kind of, within the remit of this, a bit like the Olympics, there's no competition, because we all want and should want for the same thing that goes beyond the kind of walls of our organizations.
Claire, you made a point earlier about a level playing field, and how on the sports field it really is a level playing field. And it's interesting, isn't it, that within sports we see that actually most of the top champions around the world are people of color. When they don't have organizations or policies or strategies holding them back, it's based entirely on their own personal talent and potential. They reach the top. There's nothing stopping them. And if only we could replicate that in our own organizations. Ramses, may I come to you?
Sure. Yeah, I think my panelists captured it well. I'm a firm believer that it's important to have a holistic approach to diversity and inclusion just overall. What's our governance model? How are we measuring success? Claire mentioned it earlier. Let's have a conversation about the stuff that's not working. What's failing? What are we going to throw out the window and continue to move forward with? Workforce, what strategies are we using around there? What are we doing from a supplier diversity standpoint? What are we doing from a philanthropic standpoint? Programming as well. I think building out a holistic approach, and on top of that, having a strategy for racial justice is equally as important, and also taking into consideration that what we're trying to do is we're trying to build in a culture shift, and we have to be careful not to have over analysis, to spend too much time having the courageous conversations. The conversations are important, but they have to be backed up by action. If we're spending too much time saying, well, let's do a deep dive and take a look at, why this is happening, or let's review, let's further explore, let's see if we can double click. No, at a certain point, you have to hold yourself accountable and say, we're going to look at the numbers and how we're moving the numbers. The problem with D&I overall is enough with doing the participation credit. Enough with talking about how many people are we putting through programs, how many people are going through that. Let's take a look at the numbers of who's in the organization in senior leadership roles. Let's take a look at how many people of color we have on the board. Hold yourself accountable to that. At the end of the day, we're looking for that culture shift, so we have to make shift happen.
Accountability is so important, isn't it? Accountability. Actually, I'm just going to say here at the BBC, our new Director General Tim Davie, in his first speech to staff, said that accountability is going to be key, and that on his watch, no one is going to get a promotion. No leader is going to get a promotion unless they can show how diverse their teams are, how inclusive their teams are, and they show inclusive behaviors. And I thought that was a really powerful message to send. We've covered that point. Actually, there was something I wanted to come back to you on, Lord Simon, when you spoke about, the economy. We're facing a downturn. It is so easy to default to our old ways and to fall into what they call unconscious bias, those quick decisions where we know that bias comes in. How do you think that people can mitigate against that?
Being bold, being brave, having the leadership around them. Someone like Claire. Claire will remind Steve, you said the words, you talked the talk, now walk the walk. You can't say that you're on the Black Lives Matter side and put me on a panel globally and then fail. That our leaders need to be held to account. I would say to a company, look, I don't even mind. I want you to be selfish. I want you to have self-interest, to be the best. And if you truly want to be the best, then you've got to embrace diversity.
Yeah.
As in a global market, that you need to be many things to many people. But if you have this rigid focus that you can only get from certain universities, the brightest people, then you are locking out a whole range of potential talent. Shoku, I'm pleased about that your boss spoke about accountability. But in my opinion, when it comes to the whole saga about Rule Britannia, he failed. We have this sort of prom song which they sing every year. It's called Rule Britannia. Rule Britannia, Britannia ruled the waves. Britain never, never will be slaves. And there was this argument that actually in the 21st century we should not be holding that song in great reverence. And the BBC said, yeah, they're probably right. And then the backlash. And then the BBC, no, we probably got it wrong. I say this, imagine for a second, primary school kids, 10 and 11, from mixed backgrounds, singing Rule Britannia. Could you imagine that? I don't think so. If it's not right for 10-year-olds, it shouldn't be revered by adults. So we have to be bold. We have to be brave. I don't want to knock you, the BBC, but our institutions need to be held to account. We talk the talk, we must walk the walk, and we have to confront. We have to confront all these things. You mentioned, of course, that in sports, in the UK, Ramses, we have football, soccer, right? Let me tell you, in the highest division, more than a third of the players are black. More than a third. In some of the teams, it's more than half. There's only one black manager. And I think that's out of the 2 divisions. So we're the entertainers, but we can't manage. Give me a break. You know, if Black Lives Matter is to mean anything, there needs to be a pathway that the talent on the pitch can show their talent in the boardroom. Anything less is a betrayal. Anything less discredits our organization.
So, Lord Simon, I'm going to move on to our last question. Now, this summit is not a talking shop. It's all about meaningful action for real change, because we are all tired of talking. So before we go, I'd really like to ask each one of you to share one action or one tip our audience can take away that will be transformative, that will really help to shift the dial in their organizations. Ramses, could I come to you?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I have several that I can share. The one that comes to mind first and foremost would have to be with the fact that we need to have more representation in senior leadership roles. So developing a plan in order to really make that happen, and acknowledging that, you know, you have a great HR team within your organization and a talent acquisition team, but if they feel as if they don't necessarily have the resources, there are partner organizations that can help them find that talent. What you will find oftentimes is when you have leaderships, you know, people of color in senior leadership roles, it will help bring more diversity to an organization. We spend a lot of time talking about diversity data and looking into it. Our employees do the same type of analysis. They look around the organization and they look to see if there's people that look like themselves in positions that they eventually aspire to get into. If they do not see that, they don't stop looking. They continue to look, but they look outside the organization. And once that happens, you've lost the game. So it's really important to really make sure that you have a plan to bring in senior leadership, exactly what Lord Simon was talking about in terms of if we can be in the front line, if we could be in middle management, we need to be in the boardroom.
Claire, one quick, sharp tip.
One quick, sharp tip is look beyond the numbers as well. Look for the signs and symbols around the formal and informal uses of power to focus on inclusion.
That was very short and sweet. Thank you. Lord Simon, we're going to give you the last
slightly
word.
Controversial. I'll try and be quick. I'm going to be slightly controversial again. It's not just black faces in high places. Sometimes you can have black faces in high places and they can be shocking. They can hold black people back. So they need to understand race equality. That's why my one thing would be for the companies to have race disparity audits to see where everybody is in all those levels with ethnic minority pay gaps, then have a plan to close the gaps, as a whole, everything changes.
Three fantastic tips to finish on. Now, we've heard some real gems of wisdom there from great thought leaders in this field. Lord Simon, Claire, and Ramses, thank you all very much indeed for your time on this panel and for that incredibly rich and insightful conversation. If I may add my own final tip or takeaway for audiences, I believe that most people want to do the right thing, but sometimes there is an empathy gap, and we've heard a lot about empathy today. And there is a famous quote in To Kill a Mockingbird when Atticus says to Scout, "If you can learn a simple trick, Scout, you'll get along a lot better with all kinds of folks. You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb inside his skin and walk around in it." Note, he said his skin, not his shoes. And if you are a person of color, you can't change the color of your skin. So I think that there's one thing you can do is to speak to your Black and Asian and minority colleagues. Really listen without getting defensive and try to understand what it is like to live in their skin. And if you don't like what you hear, do something to make a change and start with yourself. As Ramses said, start with the man in the mirror. I also really believe in the value of exclusion workshops that allow those in positions of privilege and power to experience, even if it's for a brief moment, what it feels like to be excluded or to be treated unfairly. Now it's over to you. We would love for you to pledge to write to Layla in 3 months' time to chart your journey and the actions that you've taken, so that hopefully when we meet again in a year's time, our collective actions will have helped to shift the global dial. Thank you again for being here. And if you're live inside the summit, please look to the left of your screen for speed networking and a virtual booth during the ad break. Don't forget, you can catch up on all content after the summit at www.dialglobal.org. Any thoughts you have on how to make Dial Global Summit more inclusive, please do let us know. And don't forget to tag Dial Global and use our social media handle, #MovingTheDial. We'll see you soon for our next panel in 15 minutes' time, where we have more fantastic guests sharing the stories around diversity, inclusion, and belonging. Thank you very much.
Welcome to a world you didn't know existed, where millions travel daily to do what they love, in the places they trust. Connect with audiences in captivating ways. We are Verizon Media.
At Verizon Media, no matter what you want, you can find it.
You can pitch an idea.
People working together, being a lot more collaborative.
Whatever I'm really passionate about.
We have an opportunity to tell stories in a new way.
DIAL stands for Diverse, Inclusive, Aspirational Leaders, Global. We welcome people from all cultures and walks of life who seek a deeper understanding of our world. We passionately believe in the power of unique ideas and purpose-led initiatives that help inspire, educate and motivate others to make the world a better place. We will bring you education and inspiration from the world's thought leaders and inspired thinkers. Our global community are keen to share with you their ideas, their purpose, their passion, their initiatives, their knowledge that really help transform the way that we look at the world. We will be meeting online and at Dial Global events. We also give back to our 5 core pillars of charity: education, the youth, environmental, mental health, and the creative arts.
Young people can achieve so much more when you work in partnership with each other.
Because when you see others engaged in positive things, you want to do something positive.
The people that we have on stage tonight are role models to the next generation. They're role models to ensure that people know they can work in every single area of football because they are welcome to and because they will make football better. Amen.
This award and what this night, even if people don't win an award themselves, it gives them confidence, gives them the belief, and everybody wants to be recognised at some stage.
It's a celebration of achievement in the culture and a lot of hard work that's gone behind it.
We're striving to get more black athletes into coaching. I'd like to see more in management as well. People like me lending my time, and they can only try and grow it as well. But we have to keep persevering.
20 years ago, a small group of United Nations and business leaders came up with a visionary proposal.
I propose that you, the business leaders here gathered in Davos, and we, the United Nations, initiate a global compact of shared values and principles which will give a human face to the global market.
I always say part of Kofi Annan's genius was he invited business, but he also addressed civil society and labor organizations.
The mission of the United Nations Global Compact is to mobilize companies around the world to align their operations and strategies with 10 universal principles in the areas of human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption.
For me, the UN is the beacon of principles, values, and humanism in the world.
"2020 has opened all of our eyes to the shocking inequalities that still exist around us. But there's no doubt that the Black Lives Matter movement has amplified the voices of black people across the world. We all must stand alongside them in support of making change happen. So I'm absolutely thrilled to share with you the launch of this new manifesto, a commitment to racial equality. This is a set of commitments from across our co-op, from procurement through to people, from campaigning through to customer propositions. These commitments kickstart a real shift in the way we lead and do business here at the co-op. We believe that the act of not being racist is not enough. So I'm crystal clear that at the co-op we are anti-racist. That means that we will work to rid ourselves of the inequalities that currently exist in our organisation. And when we see racism happening in front of us, we won't stand by. We'll speak out against it. Now, I'll be honest, we're not where I want us to be at this moment, but facing into this is a humbling but important first step. The next steps are to listen well and to take bold action. Together, we're cooperating for a fairer world.
Alpha is a financial technology company, specifically asset finance. We develop our software here in London, and then we have technical and functional staff on site at our clients helping them move onto it. For example, Mercedes-Benz in the US, if you had a car on a lease or a loan, it'd be our software helping them run their business.
The key thing that makes us stand out is our delivery track record, and we achieve that delivery track record by recruiting people who are positive, engaged, energetic, enthusiastic, people who are willing to learn.
Graduates are important to Alpha because it's genuinely a set of fresh minds bringing in fresh ideas. We're also very keen to expand from the bottom up.
I definitely agree. I think one of the key things that graduates bring to us is the energy. They come into the teams, they're fresh, it's new, it's exciting, and they bring drive and enthusiasm.
Diversity and inclusion is so important to Alpha because we truly believe that people can achieve more when they can be themselves and when they can come to work and be their best selves.
I'm Layla Mackenzie-Dellis, founder of the Mackenzie-Dellis Packer Review and CEO of Dial Global. The Mackenzie-Dellis Packer Review, in partnership with Ipsos Mori, is a groundbreaking report on diversity and inclusion in the UK workplace. The review means such a lot to me and the team personally, and a huge amount of work from so many different people has been involved in order to bring this to light and to fruition. This is going to be the first comprehensive nationwide review that asks about D&I policies, priorities and leadership representation across multiple facets of workplace diversity and inclusion.
You know, it's great to be part of this review, the Mackenzie-Dellis Packer Review, and particularly at this historical time. And a little bit about me, I'm Simon Woolley, I'm the Director of Operation Blackboat and the number 10 Race Advisory Chair for the Race Disparity Unit. This is a very, very exciting time. I mean, it's been a traumatic time with COVID-19 and the devastating impact it's had on Black and Asian minority communities. But it's also a time in which change is afoot and people are looking at diversity and inclusion in a very meaningful way. And I'm absolutely convinced that this review, with all the people involved, including my brilliant co-chair, Ben Page, and the very brilliant Layla Mackenzie and her team, will dramatically move the dial and ensure that companies are bigger, better, more diverse, more inclusive. This is what Britain PLC needs.
Welcome to a world you didn't know existed, where millions travel daily to do what they love, in the places they trust. connect with audiences in captivating ways. We are Verizon Media.
At Verizon Media, no matter what you want, you can find it.
You can pitch an idea.
People working together, being a lot more collaborative.
Whatever I'm really passionate about.
We have an opportunity to tell stories in a new way.
DIAL stands for Diverse, Inclusive, Aspirational Leaders, Global. We welcome people from all cultures and walks of life who seek a deeper understanding of our world. We passionately believe in the power of unique ideas and purpose-led initiatives that help inspire, educate and motivate others to make the world a better place. We will bring you education and inspiration from the world's thought leaders and inspired thinkers. Our global community are keen to share with you their ideas, their purpose, their passion, their initiatives, their knowledge that really help transform the way that we look at the world. We will be meeting online and at DIAL Global events. We also give back to our 5 core pillars of charity: education, the youth, environmental, mental health, and the creative arts.
Organization, young people can achieve so much more when you work in partnership with each other.
Because when you see others engaged in positive things, you want to do something positive.
Hello everyone, I'm Leanna Brendes and I'm head of Yahoo Finance UK. I'd love to welcome you all back to this DIAL Global Virtual Summit for this panel entitled Focusing on Ability, Looking Past the Visible and Invisible Disabilities to Focus on What Matters. So not only am I the head of Yahoo Finance UK, I'm also the global lead for our Asian ERG here at Verizon Media. And for this panel, I am very pleased to say that we are joined by 4 very inspirational leaders who I'm delighted to welcome on this virtual stage. They are Michelle Carney, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Special Olympics. And we've got John Dutton, who's the Chief Executive Officer of RLWC 21. And Katie Day, Athlete Leader at the Special Olympics. And Fiona Murden, who's the author and Managing Director at Oroka. So to give background just on what this panel is about, it's all about how disability inclusion ensures everybody has the same opportunities to participate in every aspect of life to the best of their abilities and desires. The Special Olympics and the Rugby League World Cup are global examples of this and celebrate athletes with intellectual and or physical disabilities. The competition itself focuses on individuals' unique talents and abilities, not on their disabilities. Yet in everyday life, many disabled individuals feel ignored, marginalized, and discriminated against by their employers. So how do leaders make sure disabled people are valued for what they bring to an organization and ensure everyone gets a fair chance? So before we get into detail, it would be really great to learn a bit more about each of you and for the audience here and why you are so passionate about diversity, inclusion, and belonging. So Michelle, if you'd like to start.
Hi, thank you so much for having us on this panel. I'm fortunate to have what I believe is the best job in sport. John may disagree, but as the Chief Executive of Special Olympics Great Britain, I've had a varied career. I've worked in sport and commercial and charity sectors. And I started out in disability sport, and that was my passion. My career path was a little bit eclectic, but I've always found myself drawn to working with groups who really didn't have a voice. So I spent some time in Africa, developed a social enterprise using football as a tool to educate about HIV/AIDS. I worked at ActionAid, where our work focused primarily on the rights of women and girls. And then I went full circle, came back to Special Olympics, and where we work for the rights of people with intellectual disabilities. So for my view, I believe that we're all capable of amazing things. I believe that we all have a voice. I think we all have a right to be heard. And that's where I'm most passionate about. And I think as leaders, it's our responsibility, my responsibility, to create platforms and environments